called me the loser graduate at every family gathering. My parents, my siblings, even my cousins, they all laughed at my degree like it was worthless paper. The loser graduate can't even afford his own place, they'd say. Meanwhile, they all lived rent-free in properties I didn't know I owned, properties my grandfather left me. For years, they mocked me while living off my inheritance. But the day I discovered the truth, that's when the loser graduate became their worst nightmare. I signed those eviction notices with the biggest smile on my face. And what happened next? Let me tell you how the family who mocked me for being a failure ended up begging the loser graduate for mercy. My name is John, and I'm 43 years old. For the last 20 years, my family has treated me like I was the punchline to a joke, only they found funny. It started the day I graduated from college with a degree in English literature. Cohen, you'd think earning a degree would make your parents proud, right? Not mine. The moment I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, my father looked at my mother and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, well, there goes $40,000 down the drain. My brother Marcus laughed so hard he nearly choked on his champagne. That was the beginning of my life as the loser graduate. Growing up, I was always different from my siblings. Marcus was the golden child football star, business major, everything my dad wanted in a son. My sister Rachel was the princess, married to a lawyer, living what my mother called the dream life. Then there was me, the middle child who liked books more than sports, who wanted to teach instead of climb the corporate ladder, who believed passion mattered more than a paycheck. My family never understood that. They never even tried. After graduation, I moved into a small apartment across town and got a job teaching high school English. The pay wasn't great, but I loved what I did. I loved watching students discover the power of words, helping them find their voices through writing. But to my family, I was just a disappointment. Every holiday dinner, every birthday party, every family gathering became an opportunity for them to remind me of my failures. How's the teaching going, loser graduate? Marcus would ask with that smirk on his face. Still living in that shoebox apartment, Rachel would add, flipping her perfectly styled hair. When are you going to get a real job? My parents never defended me. In fact, they encouraged it. My mother would sigh dramatically and say things like, well, at least we have Marcus and Rachel to be proud of. My father would just shake his head, disappointed, like I was some kind of burden he had to carry. It hurt. God, it hurt more than I ever let them see. But I kept showing up. I kept trying to be part of the family, thinking maybe one day they'd see my worth. Maybe one day they'd realize that success isn't just measured in dollar signs. The mockery got worse over the years. When Marcus bought his first house at 26, my father threw him a party. When Rachel had her first child, my mother cried tears of joy for weeks. But when I published my first article in a literary magazine, silence. When I won a teaching award, my mother said, "That's nice, dear," and immediately changed the subject to Marcus's latest business deal. I was invisible unless they needed someone to ridicule. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that my grandfather had been watching all of this unfold. Grandpa Henry was my father's dad, a quiet man who made his fortune in real estate back in the 60s and 70s. He owned properties all over the city, apartment buildings, commercial spaces, even a few houses in the suburbs. He was wealthy, but he lived modestly. He always told me that money wasn't meant to be flaunted. It was meant to provide security and help others. I was the only one who ever really listened to him, the only one who visited him regularly at his small house on Maple Street. Not because I wanted something, but because I genuinely enjoyed his company. Quitty. We'd sit on his porch for hours, drinking iced tea and talking about books, about life, about what really mattered. He'd tell me stories about building his business from nothing, about the mistakes he made and the lessons he learned. John, he'd say, real success isn't about impressing other people. It's about being true to yourself and using what you have to make the world a little better. I carried those words with me through every humiliation, every cruel comment, every family gathering where I felt like an outsider in my own family. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that like button and comment on this video. Grandpa Henry passed away when I was 35. It was sudden, a heart attack in his sleep. I was devastated. He was the only person in my family who ever made me feel valued, who saw me for who I really was instead of who they wanted me to be. At his funeral, my family was more interested in talking about his estate than mourning him. I heard Marcus whisper to Rachel, "I wonder how much the old man was worth." It made me sick. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. I almost didn't go. I knew Grandpa Henry had money, and I knew my family would expect most of it to go to Marcus, the successful one, or be divided equally among the grandchildren. I didn't care about the money, I just missed my grandfather. But something told me to show up, so I did. We gathered in the office of Robert Mitchell, Grandpa Henry's attorney for over 40 years. Mr. Mitchell was an elderly man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. My parents sat front and center, with Marcus and Rachel on either side. I took a seat in the back as usual, trying to make myself invisible. Mr. Mitchell cleared his throat and began reading the will. Most of it was standard stuff, small bequests to various charities, personal items distributed among family members. My grandmother had passed years earlier, so everything went to their children and grandchildren. Then Mr. Mitchell got to the big part, the real estate holdings. My father leaned forward, eager. Marcus was practically vibrating with anticipation. And then Mr. Mitchell said something that changed everything. To my grandson John, who was the only one who ever truly understood me, I leave my entire real estate portfolio, including but not limited to the apartment buildings at 2247 Oak Street, 1156 Pine Avenue, and 3389 Cedar Lane, the commercial properties on Main Street, and the residential homes at 447 Birch Road, 892 Willow Court, and 1523 Elm Drive. I also leave him the accumulated rental income held in trust, currently valued at approximately $2.3 million. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. I sat there, stunned, unable to process what I'd just heard. My father's face turned purple. Marcus stood up so fast, his chair fell backward. Rachel's mouth hung open in shock. My mother looked like she might faint. "This has to be a mistake," my father sputtered. My father wouldn't leave everything to John. He's just a teacher. Mr. Mitchell looked at my father with cold professionalism. "There is no mistake, Mr. Patterson. Your father was very clear about his wishes. He left a letter for John as well, which I'll provide momentarily. The properties are legally John's, as is the trust fund. Everything has been properly documented and filed." Marcus exploded. "This is bullshit. John doesn't know the first thing about managing properties. He's been living in a crappy apartment for 20 years. Why the hell would Grandpa leave everything to the loser graduate?" There it was again. That name. That horrible nickname they'd tormented me with for 2 decades. But this time, it didn't hurt. This time, I understood what Grandpa Henry had done. He'd given me the power to either forgive them or make them understand what it felt like to be looked down upon, dismissed, treated as less than. Mr. Mitchell handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter in my grandfather's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. He'd written me countless letters over the years, always encouraging, always kind. This one was dated just 2 months before he died. "Dear John," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. I want you to know that leaving you everything wasn't a decision I made lightly. I've watched your family treat you like you don't matter for years, and it's broken my heart. You're the only one who ever visited me because you wanted to, not because you wanted something. You're the only one who understands that wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege. The properties I'm leaving you generate substantial income. Some of your family members have been living in these properties for years, paying what they believe is rent to a property management company I owned. They don't know they've been living in buildings I owned, buildings that now belong to you. What you do with this information is up to you. You can be kind or you can be just. Sometimes, John, those aren't the same thing. Whatever you choose, know that I'm proud of you. Cody, you've lived a life of integrity, and that's worth more than all the money in the world. Love, Grandpa Henry." My hands shook as I read those words. I looked up at my family, really looked at them. My father was arguing with Mr. Mitchell, demanding to see documentation. Marcus was pacing, cursing under his breath. Rachel was crying. though whether from shock or greed, I couldn't tell. My mother just stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Just forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. Where are you living, Marcus? I asked quietly. My voice cut through the chaos. He stopped pacing and glared at me. What? Your house? The one on Willow Court. What's the address? His face went pale. 892 Willow Court. Why? I looked at Rachel. And you, Rachel, where's your place? She swallowed hard. 1523 Elm Drive. I turned to my parents. Let me guess. 447 Birch Road. My father's purple face now looked gray. None of them said a word. They were all living in properties that now belonged to me. The irony was almost poetic. For 20 years, they'd mocked me for living in a small apartment, for not achieving their definition of success, for being the loser graduate who couldn't afford his own place. And all that time, they'd been living in properties my grandfather owned, properties he'd left to me because I was the only one who never wanted anything from him except his company. How long have you known? My mother whispered. Known what? That your grandfather owned these properties. I looked her straight in the eye. I found out about 5 minutes ago. Same as you. Mr. Mitchell cleared his throat again. Clarification. The property management company that's been collecting rent from these properties has been depositing that money into the trust fund. John now has full control over all properties and can make whatever decisions he sees fit regarding tenancy, rent, or sale. Marcus lunged toward me, but my father grabbed his arm. You can't kick us out, Marcus said, his voice desperate now instead of angry. We have families. We have lives here. Like I had a life you all made miserable. The words came out before I could stop them. 20 years of pain, of humiliation, of being made to feel worthless, it all bubbled to the surface. Like I had feelings you all trampled on every chance you got. Tell me, Marcus, what was it you called me at Thanksgiving last year? Oh, right, the loser graduate who'll never amount to anything. Does that ring a bell? Rachel started crying harder. We didn't mean it, John. We were just joking around. Joking. I stood up, my voice rising. Called it joking when you told your friends I was the family embarrassment. When you excluded me from your wedding party because I'd bring down the aesthetic. When you told your kids not to mention me at school because you were ashamed, those were jokes to you. John, please, my mother said, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. Don't, I said. Don't touch me. Don't pretend you care now. Per 20 years, I showed up to every holiday, every birthday, every family event, hoping you'd see me, really see me, hoping you'd realize that teaching kids to think critically and express themselves was just as valuable as Marcus's business deals or Rachel's society parties. But you never did. I was nothing to you, less than nothing. I was your punchline. My father finally found his voice. Son, I know we've been hard on you, hard on me. I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. Dad, you once introduced me to your colleagues as the one who couldn't hack it in the real world. You told people I was wasting my life. You made it clear every single day that I was a disappointment to you. And now that you realize I'm the one with all the power, suddenly I'm son again. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Mitchell packed up his briefcase quietly, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding in his office. John, if you'd like to schedule a time to go over the details of the estate and discuss management options, please call my office. He handed me his card and left, probably grateful to escape. I stood there looking at my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, support me, believe in me. Instead, they'd spent 2 decades making me feel worthless. Heat. And now they needed me. Now they were scared. Now they understood what it felt like to be powerless. Please, John, Rachel sobbed. My kids are in school in this district. We can't just uproot them. Funny, I said. I don't remember you caring about uprooting me when you convinced Mom and Dad to cancel the family trip to my college graduation because it was too far to drive. You all went to Marcus's graduation. You flew to Hawaii for that. But mine, too much trouble for the loser graduate. I walked toward the door, then stopped. I need time to think about this. I need time to figure out what Grandpa Henry would want me to do. But I'll tell you one thing, things are going to change. The way you've treated me, the way you've made me feel for 20 years, that ends now. I left them standing there and drove home to my small apartment, the one they'd mocked for so long. Clean. That night, I read Grandpa Henry's letter over and over, trying to understand what he wanted from me. He'd said I could be kind or just, but not necessarily both. What did that mean? Did he want me to evict them? To make them suffer the way I'd suffered? Or was he giving me the opportunity to be the bigger person? Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. For 3 weeks, I didn't answer anyone's calls. Come in my voicemail filled up with messages, apologies, please, explanations, and eventually threats. Marcus left a message saying he'd sue me for emotional distress. Rachel's husband, the lawyer, tried to cite some obscure legal precedent about tenant rights. My mother cried on every message, saying she couldn't believe I'd abandoned my family like this. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. Where was she when I was being abandoned at every family gathering? I spent those weeks meeting with Mr. Mitchell, learning about the properties, understanding the business my grandfather had built. The buildings were well maintained, profitable, and managed by a competent team. I didn't have to do much except make major decisions. I also discovered that my grandfather had kept detailed records of every interaction he'd had with each family member. He'd documented years of their greed, their demands for money, their lack of interest in his well-being unless it benefited them. The only folder with positive notes. Mine, one entry particularly stood out. It was from 5 years ago, after a family Thanksgiving where Marcus had publicly mocked my salary in front of everyone. Grandpa Henry wrote, "Today I watched my family humiliate John for choosing meaning over money. They don't understand that he's the richest one among them, rich in character, in kindness, in integrity. I've decided that when I'm gone, he'll have the choice. They never gave him the choice to show mercy or dispense justice. I trust he'll know which one they deserve." Reading those words, I finally understood what I had to do. Grandpa Henry wasn't asking me to choose between kindness and justice. He was asking me to recognize that sometimes justice is the kindest thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for the people who wronged you. Because without consequences, people never learn. Without accountability, they never change. I called Mr. Mitchell and asked him to draft eviction notices for all 3 properties occupied by my family members. But I also asked him to draft new lease agreements with very specific terms. Then I scheduled a family meeting at the law office. They all came, probably thinking I was finally ready to forgive and forget. They were half right. When everyone was seated, I stood at the front of the room, next to Mr. Mitchell. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Not because I had money or properties, but because I finally understood my own worth. Whether they recognized it or not, I knew who I was. I knew I mattered. Come for aunt. I've spent the last 3 weeks thinking about what Grandpa Henry wanted me to do with his estate, I began. I've read his letters, studied his records, and tried to honor the man who saw value in me when none of you did. My father started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. No, you've all had 20 years to speak. Now it's my turn. You called me the loser graduate, like it was my identity. You made me believe I was worthless because I chose a career that fulfilled me instead of one that impressed you. You mocked my home, my job, my choices, my life. And you did it while living in properties owned by the man who loved and respected me most. I nodded to Mr. Mitchell, who began handing out envelopes. Those are eviction notices. You have 60 days to vacate the properties. The room erupted. Marcus jumped up, cursing. Rachel burst into tears. My mother grabbed my father's arm like she might collapse. My father just stared at the notice, his face unreadable. However, I continued, raising my voice over the chaos. There's another option. Mr. Mitchell handed out a second set of envelopes. New lease agreements. Here are the terms. You'll pay fair market rent. which is actually lower than what you've been paying because Grandpa Henry was generous even when he didn't have to be. But there are additional conditions. I looked at each of them in turn. Marcus, you'll apologize to me publicly. Not just to me, but in front of your friends, your colleagues, the same people you humiliated me in front of. You'll acknowledge that you were wrong about me, wrong about my choices, and wrong to treat me the way you did. And you'll make a monthly donation to the literacy program at my school, because you're going to understand that education has value even if it doesn't make you rich. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. Rachel, you'll volunteer at the community center teaching art classes to underprivileged kids. 10 hours a month, no excuses. Going to learn that status and society parties aren't the only things that matter in life. And you're going to tell your children the truth about their Uncle John, that I'm not an embarrassment, and that choosing passion over profit doesn't make someone a failure. Rachel nodded slowly, tears still streaming down her face. Mom, Dad, I turned to my parents, and despite everything, my voice cracked a little. You're going to come to dinner at my apartment once a month. Not because you have to, but because you want to. You're going to get to know me, really know me. You're going to ask about my students, my writing, my life, and you're going to tell me just once that you're proud of me. Not for the money I inherited, but for the man I became despite how you treated me. My mother was crying now, too, but she nodded. My father looked broken, older somehow than he had 3 weeks ago. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. If you can't agree to these terms, then you take the eviction notice and find somewhere else to live. I'll sell the properties and donate the money to causes Grandpa Henry believed in. But if you agree, if you sign these leases and honor these commitments, then we can start to rebuild something. Not what we had before, that's gone, but maybe something better, something honest. The room was quiet except for Rachel's soft crying. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice much smaller than usual. Why are you doing this? Why not just kick us out? We deserve it. It was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years. Because Grandpa Henry taught me that real strength isn't about revenge. It's about having the power to destroy someone and choosing not to. It's about giving people the chance to be better even if they don't deserve it. But make no mistake, this is the only chance you get. You mess this up, and I will evict you without a second thought. I'm done being the loser graduate. Kind of done being your punching bag. From now on, you treat me with respect, or you're out of my life. Your choice. One by one, they signed the new leases. Marcus's hand shook as he wrote his name. Rachel couldn't stop crying. My parents both looked at me with something I'd never seen before. It might have been respect, or maybe just fear. But either way, it was different. They saw me differently. Before they left, my father approached me. John, he said quietly, I don't know how to apologize for 20 years of failure as a father, but I want you to know I'm going to try. I'm going to try to be the dad you deserved all along. I didn't hug him. I wasn't ready for that. But I nodded. That's all I ask. Try. Over the next few months, things slowly changed. Marcus made his public apology at his company's annual dinner. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from mutual friends. Privately, he told everyone he'd been wrong about me, that success came in many forms, and that he was proud to have a brother who dedicated his life to shaping young minds. Apparently, several people came up to him afterward and said they wished they'd had the courage to pursue their passions instead of just chasing money. He donated $5,000 to our school's literacy program that first month. Rachel started volunteering at the community center. At first, I think she did it begrudgingly, fulfilling her obligation. But after a few weeks, she called me excited. Actually excited to tell me about a 10-year-old girl who'd never held a paintbrush before creating something beautiful. I get it now, she said. I understand why you teach. Watching someone discover their potential, there's nothing like it. My parents came to dinner at my modest apartment. My mother brought flowers, like she was visiting someone she didn't know well and wanted to make a good impression. We sat at my small dining table, the one I'd found at a thrift store years ago, and they asked about my students. My father wanted to know about the article I was working on, analyzing themes of redemption in classic literature. My mother asked if I was seeing anyone, and when I said no, she didn't make a joke about me being unmarried at just said, "Well, when you meet the right person, I hope you'll let us meet them." At the end of that first dinner, as they were leaving, my father turned to me. His eyes were watery, and his voice was thick with emotion. "I'm proud of you, son, not because of the properties or the money. I'm proud of the man you are, the man you became without any help from me. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. I'd waited 20 years to hear those words." Good. And when I finally did, I realized something important. I didn't need them anymore. I'd already found my worth. His validation was just a bonus, not a requirement. But still, it felt good. It felt like a door that had been locked for 2 decades finally opening. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. The transformation wasn't perfect or complete. There were still awkward moments. Still times when old habits surfaced and someone said something thoughtless. But each time it happened, I calmly reminded them of the terms, and they corrected themselves. They were learning, slowly, that I wasn't a joke or a failure or someone they could dismiss. I was a person who deserved respect, just like anyone else. I kept teaching. I loved my job just as much as I always had, maybe even more now that I didn't carry the weight of my family's disappointment everywhere I went. The money from the properties, I invested most of it back into the buildings, improving them for the tenants who lived there. I also set up a scholarship fund at my school for students who wanted to pursue careers in education, or the arts fields that society often undervalues but that are essential to our humanity. I moved out of my small apartment not because I was ashamed of it, but because I could afford something better now. I bought a modest house with a library that would have made Grandpa Henry smile. I filled it with books, comfortable furniture, and photographs of the students who'd impacted my life over the years. It wasn't flashy or impressive by Marcus's standards, but it was mine, and it was perfect. One day, about a year after that meeting at Mr. Mitchell's office, I was cleaning out some boxes from Grandpa Henry's house that Mr. Mitchell had stored for me. At the bottom of one box, I found a journal. It was leather-bound, worn with age, and filled with my grandfather's handwriting. I sat on my living room floor and read it cover to cover. The journal chronicled years of family observations, hopes, disappointments, and dreams. But the last entry was dated just a week before he died. It read, "Tomorrow, I'm meeting with Robert to finalize my will. I've made my decision about the estate, and I'm at peace with it. John is the only one who never wanted anything from me except my time and my stories." Cueing. He's the only one who understands that the best things in life can't be bought or sold. I'm leaving everything to him, not to punish the others, but to give them one last chance to see what really matters. If they can't learn from this, if they can't recognize John's value even when he holds all the power, then I've failed as a father and grandfather. But I believe people can change. Cued search, I believe, when faced with losing everything, they'll finally understand what they should have treasured all along: each other. John, if you're reading this, you've already made your choice. Whatever it was, I trust it was the right one. You've always had more wisdom in your heart than the rest of them combined. I love you, grandson. Make me proud. I sat there crying, holding that journal, wishing desperately that I could call him and tell him what happened. I wanted to tell him that he was right, that people could change when they were forced to confront their cruelty. I wanted to tell him that I'd tried to honor his values, his belief in second chances tempered with accountability. I wanted to hear him say he was proud of me one more time, but I couldn't call him, so instead I made a promise to his memory. I would never forget where I came from, what I'd been through, or how it felt to be dismissed and diminished. And I would use that understanding to be better than the people who hurt me, better than the pain they caused, better than the bitterness I could have become. Today, I'm 43 years old. I'm still a high school English teacher. I still live modestly, though I no longer live in that tiny apartment my family mocked. I manage a real estate portfolio worth millions, but you'd never know it by looking at me or talking to me. My students certainly don't know, and that's how I want it. Because my value doesn't come from what I own. It comes from who I am and what I do with my time on this earth. My family. They kept their promises. Marcus still makes his monthly donations and has actually gotten involved with the literacy program, mentoring struggling readers. Rachel runs the art program at the community center now and calls me at least once a week to tell me about the kids she's working with. My parents come to dinner regularly, and last month, my mother framed one of my articles and hung it in their living room, right next to Marcus's business awards and Rachel's society photos. It's a small gesture, but it means everything. Do I forgive them? I'm working on it. Forgiveness is a process, not an event. Some days are easier than others. Some days I remember a particularly cruel comment or a painful memory, and the hurt feels fresh again. But then I remember what Grandpa Henry taught me, that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So I'm letting it go, little by little, day by day. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. The other day, one of my students asked me if I'd ever wanted to be rich. We were discussing The Great Gatsby and themes of wealth versus happiness. I thought about it for a moment, then I told him the truth. I am rich, I said. I have a job I love, students who challenge me and make me think, family who's learning to appreciate me, and the memory of a grandfather who believed in me when no one else did. That's wealth that no amount of money can buy. The student, a smart kid named David, who reminds me a bit of myself at that age, nodded thoughtfully. So the loser graduate turned out to be the real winner. Court, he asked, and I realized he'd overheard the nickname somewhere, probably from someone in town who knew my family. I smiled. The only losers are the people who measure success by what impresses strangers instead of what fulfills their soul. Remember that, David, when you're choosing your path in life. Don't let anyone else's definition of success determine your direction. Not your parents, not your friends, not society. Only you know what will make you truly happy. Click. He wrote that down in his notebook, and I hoped it would stick with him the way Grandpa Henry's wisdom stuck with me. This whole experience taught me several things. First, that family should lift you up, not tear you down. And it's okay to demand better treatment from people who claim to love you. Second, that power is most beautiful when it's used with restraint and wisdom. I could have destroyed my family, kicked them out, cut them off completely, and honestly, part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted them to suffer the way I'd suffered. But then I would have become just like them, petty, cruel, more interested in hurting others than healing myself. Third, I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'll never forget how they treated me. Those memories are part of who I am now, part of what makes me more compassionate to my students who feel like outsiders or failures. But I can choose not to let those memories control my present or my future. I can choose to move forward without carrying that weight of resentment everywhere I go. And finally, I learned that sometimes the people who doubt you the most end up needing you the most. Life has a funny way of turning tables. The underdog becomes the champion. The loser becomes the landlord. The disappointment becomes the decision maker. When that happens, you get to choose what kind of person you want to be. You can be vindictive, or you can be visionary. You can punish, or you can teach. You can destroy bridges, or you can rebuild them stronger and better than before. I chose to rebuild not because they deserved it, but because I deserved to be the kind of person who could hold power without abusing it. Grandpa Henry gave me more than property and money. He gave me a test, a challenge, an opportunity to prove that I was everything he believed I was. And I think, wherever he is, he's proud of how I handled it. Do I still think about that day in Mr. Mitchell's office? Of course. It was the day my entire life changed. It was the day I stopped being the loser graduate and started being just John, a teacher, a grandson, a decent human being trying to do right by the people who wronged him. It was the day I discovered that the best revenge isn't making others suffer. It's becoming so secure in yourself that their opinions can't touch you anymore. My brother Marcus told me something interesting a few months ago. We were having coffee, something we do occasionally now, and he said, "You know what the hardest part of all this has been? realizing that I spent 20 years tearing down someone who was already better than me. I had to lose everything to figure out that you were never the loser. John, I was. I was the loser because I had a brother who could have taught me so much about living a meaningful life, and I was too arrogant to see it. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. He continued, working with those kids at the literacy program, watching them struggle with words and then suddenly get it, suddenly understand. That's given me more satisfaction than any business deal I've ever made. You knew that at 22, it took me until I was 45 to figure it out. That conversation stuck with me because it proved what I'd always believed, that people can change, grow, and learn, even after decades of being stuck in destructive patterns. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without consequences. But it can happen if people are willing to do the hard work of self-examination and transformation. Rachel had a similar awakening. She told me that before all this happened, she'd been depressed for years. I had everything I thought I wanted, she explained. The house, the husband, the social status, but I felt empty. Cleat. Then you made me volunteer at that community center, and it was like I remembered who I used to be before I became obsessed with appearances. I used to love art. I used to paint for hours when I was a kid. Somewhere along the way, I traded passion for prestige, and I didn't even realize how miserable it made me. Now she paints again. She has a small studio in her garage, and she creates these incredible pieces that she donates to charity, auctions benefiting arts education. God, she's not famous, and she's not making millions from her art, but she's happy, actually happy. And she tells people that her brother taught her that lesson by refusing to let her live in his property without earning it through meaningful action. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. My parents have changed too, though in subtler ways. My dad actually came to my school last month to speak to my class about business ethics. He talked about his mistakes, about times he prioritized money over relationships, success over integrity. He told them about his son, Mehu, chose a different path and ended up being the most successful person he knew. Success, he told my students, isn't about how much money you make or how many people know your name. It's about going tantar novamente zero, continuardo bed at night, knowing you made a difference in someone's life. My son figured that out at 22. I'm 68 and I'm still learning it from him. Watching my father say those things to my students was surreal. For years, I'd imagined what it would feel like to have him acknowledge my worth, to hear him say he was wrong about me. But actually experiencing it, it was both healing and heartbreaking. Healing because it validated everything I'd always believed about myself. Heartbreaking because I realized how much time we'd wasted, how many years of relationship we'd lost because of pride and prejudice and narrow definitions of success. My mother has started a book club. She invited me to join, and now, once a month, I sit with her and a group of her friends discussing literature. She told me recently that she'd never really read much before, that she'd always been too busy with social obligations and family management. Clant, I didn't understand why you loved books so much, she admitted. I thought they were just an escape, a waste of time. But they're not. They're windows into other lives, other perspectives. They teach empathy and understanding. You were trying to share that with us all along, and we just mocked you for it. These moments of recognition, these acknowledgments of past failures, they don't erase the pain. But they do something maybe more important. They create hope. Hope that people can evolve, that families can heal, that even the deepest wounds can scar over and stop hurting quite so much. The eviction notice I handed them that day, it became a metaphor for something bigger. I wasn't just evicting them from physical properties. I was evicting toxic behavior from my life. I was evicting the idea that I had to accept mistreatment from people just because we shared DNA. I was evicting the belief that I was somehow less valuable because I chose meaning over money. And in doing so, I created space for something new, to grow a family dynamic based on mutual respect instead of hierarchy and ridicule. I won't pretend it's perfect now. We still have disagreements. There are still moments when old patterns try to reassert themselves. Just last month, at a family barbecue, Marcus made a joke about my car being old, and for a second, the room went silent. Everyone tensed up, waiting to see what would happen. But then Marcus caught himself, and he immediately said, "Actually, you know what? That car is reliable, paid off, and gets you where you need to go. That's smarter than my lease that costs me $800 a month for something I'll never own." It was a small moment, but it showed real growth. He recognized his old behavior pattern and corrected it himself without me having to say anything. That's what real change looks like. Not perfection, but awareness and effort. I think about what my life would be like if Grandpa Henry hadn't left me everything. I'd probably still be teaching, still living modestly, still being mocked at family gatherings. But I'd also still be hoping for validation that would never come, still showing up to be hurt over and over again, still believing somewhere deep inside that maybe they were right about me. The inheritance didn't just give me financial security. It gave me proof that someone saw my worth, that I wasn't crazy for believing I mattered. But here's the thing, I shouldn't have needed that proof. My worth wasn't created by Grandpa Henry's validation or his inheritance. It existed before that, and it would have existed even if he'd left me nothing. I was always valuable. I was always worthy of respect. The difference is that now I know it, bone deep, and I'll never forget it again. That's what I try to teach my students, especially the ones who feel like they don't fit in, who have families or communities that don't understand or appreciate them. I tell them about being the loser graduate. I don't tell them about the inheritance or the properties that's not relevant to the lesson, but I tell them about being mocked for my choices, about how it felt to be the family disappointment, and about how I survived it by knowing my own truth regardless of what anyone else said. Cotro, your value, I tell them, is inherent. It's not determined by grades or popularity or your parents' approval or society's expectations. You have worth simply because you exist, because you're a human being with thoughts and feelings and potential. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. And if they try, that's their failure, not yours. I had a student last year, a girl named Emily, who was struggling. She wanted to be a writer, but her parents wanted her to be a doctor or lawyer, something practical. She was miserable, getting sick from stress, losing her spark. I told her my story, the whole story, and I asked her one question. Would you rather spend your life making others happy and yourself miserable? Or would you rather pursue your passion and find people who celebrate that choice? She chose writing. Her parents were furious at first. They blamed me for putting ideas in her head. But Emily is thriving now. She got into a great creative writing program. She's published several short stories, and she calls me sometimes just to say thank you. "You gave me permission to choose myself," she said once. That's the best gift a teacher can give. That's what Grandpa Henry did for me. He gave me permission to choose myself, to value my own judgment over my family's expectations. And then he gave me the resources to make that choice stick, to prove that I wasn't wrong about what mattered in life. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. People ask me sometimes if I regret not cutting my family off completely, if I should have just taken the nuclear option and removed them from my life entirely. The honest answer is that I don't know. Some days I think it might have been easier to walk away, to start fresh with people who never knew the loser graduate version of me. But most days, I'm glad I gave them the chance to change. Not for them, but for me. Because I needed to know that I was better than the pain they caused me. I needed to prove to myself that I could hold power without abusing it, that I could demand respect without becoming cruel. Besides, there's something deeply satisfying about watching people who doubted you come to understand your worth. It's not about gloating or saying, "I told you so." It's about finally being seen, really seen, by the people whose blindness hurt you most. And yeah, maybe that's prideful or petty or whatever, but I'm human. I spent 20 years invisible to my own family. Letting them see me now, that matters. The properties are doing well. I hired a better management company. one that treats tenants like people instead of profit centers. I've made improvements, kept rents reasonable, and actually gotten to know many of the people who live in my buildings. There's a single mother on Oak Street who's working 2 jobs to put her kids through school. I quietly reduced her rent last year and set up a scholarship fund her kids can access when they're ready for college. There's an elderly couple on Pine Avenue who've lived in their apartment for 30 years. When I found out they were choosing between medication and groceries, I adjusted their rent and connected them with community resources. I'm not telling you this to make myself sound like a saint. I'm telling you because this is what Grandpa Henry meant about wealth being a responsibility. Kinda taken that money and lived lavishly, rubbed my family's faces in my newfound wealth, proved to everyone that the loser graduate was actually loaded. But what would that prove? That I could be just as shallow and materialistic as the people who judged me? No thanks. Instead, I'm using what I have to make life a little easier for people who are struggling the way I struggled. Proving that you can have money without letting it define you. That you can have power without abusing it. That you can succeed on your own terms without compromising your values. That's the real victory. Not the inheritance, not the eviction notices, not even my family's transformation. The real victory is that I stayed true to myself through all of it. Last week was the anniversary of Grandpa Henry's death. I went to his grave alone, like I do every year. I brought flowers and his favorite book, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that he read so many times the pages were falling out. I sat there for a while, just talking to him like I used to on his porch. "Hey, Grandpa," I said. "I hope you're proud of what I did with everything you left me. I tried to honor your values, tried to be the kind of man you believed I was. It hasn't been easy. There were times I wanted to be vindictive, times I wanted them to hurt the way they hurt me. But then I'd remember you. Remember how you taught me that the measure of a person isn't what they do when they're powerless, but what they do when they have all the power. I hope I passed that test." I told him about Marcus's work with the literacy program, about Rachel's art classes, about my parents' efforts to really know me. I told him about the students whose lives I've touched, the families living in his buildings who are doing a little better because of the choices I've made. And I told him that I finally understand what he meant about being rich. I'm not rich because of the money or the properties. I'm rich because I have purpose, because I know who I am, because I'm finally free from the need for validation from people who were never capable of giving it. As I sat there, a young couple walked by with their daughter, maybe 5 years old. The little girl broke away from her parents and ran over to look at the flowers on Grandpa Henry's grave. "Pretty," she said, pointing at the bouquet I'd brought. Her mother called her back apologetically, but I just smiled. "It's okay," I said. "He would have loved that. He always believed the best things in life should be shared." The little girl smiled at me and ran back to her parents. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. The last bit of anger, the final remnant of hurt from all those years of being dismissed and diminished, it loosened its grip. I'm not saying it disappeared completely. Trauma doesn't work like that. But it got lighter, less heavy, more manageable. I realized that I'd been carrying my family's judgment like a backpack full of stones. And every cruel comment, every dismissive look, every time they called me the loser graduate added another stone. The weight had been crushing me, shaping my posture, affecting how I moved through the world. But slowly, over the past few years, I'd been removing those stones one by one. Grandpa Henry's inheritance started the process, but the real work was internal. It was learning to value myself regardless of their opinions. It was setting boundaries and demanding respect. It was choosing to rebuild instead of destroy. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and comment on this video. Now, when I walk into a family gathering, I don't brace myself for impact. I don't mentally prepare for insults or anticipate humiliation. Why? I walk in knowing exactly who I am: a good teacher, a fair landlord, a decent human being trying to live with integrity. If they see that, great. If they don't, that's not my problem anymore. Their opinions don't define me. They never did. I just finally believe that now. Last Thanksgiving was different from any we'd had before. Usually, these gatherings were at my parents' house. Elaborate affairs where my mother stressed about impressing people and my father held court like some kind of patriarch. This year, I offered to host not in some mansion or fancy venue, but in my modest house with my comfortable furniture and my walls full of books. I expected them to make excuses, to find reasons why we should stick with tradition, but they didn't. They all came.